I was very excited to come today because in my 20-year career in marketing within the life sciences space, this is the very first time that I've ever been in a room with other marketing professionals at other companies, right? We always have to tend to look to the SaaS space, or as Jessica was talking about, the high-tech space. I even left life sciences and went to SaaS for a little bit to learn modern marketing best practices. So I love this room today because it's marketing and sales talking about the things that we need to do to work better together, be more efficient, and so forth. So very excited today to talk about profitable growth. And we're in a stage of macro environment right now where we have shifted from growth at all costs to a point of profitable growth. And the 10 tips that you see on the screen, you're probably going to tell me, Jen, those aren't really innovative, groundbreaking, or anything like that. But the reality is that we need to know this information, but the success really lies in the execution. And so that's what we're going to focus on today, is the how on these 3 key focus areas. And we talked a little bit earlier about a unified go-to-market strategy. I really want to talk about how we build a proactive, targeted go-to-market strategy. It's not about just seeing what the leads are coming in on the website or anything like that. It's not sales doing one thing, marketing doing another, and then customer success looking at expansion perhaps. It's truly a commercial effort. And now we need to be able to take a look at how we gain more with less. The second one, in all honesty, is my favorite. I love writing. I love storytelling aspects. And we're going to talk about how we create a company narrative and point of view that helps you stand out in the marketplace, but also understand the difference between differentiation, positioning, and messaging, where you are mostly talking about your products and features of your technology, to true value-based messaging. And how are you talking about how you solve your customers' most pressing challenges? Then we're going to wrap up on aligning marketing, sales, and customer success. It's the one that we all talk about. But again, it's really in how we go about that. And Jessica talked about a number of things in her presentation in terms of visibility that are going to feed directly into the couple of slides that I'll walk through. So first, with the increasing pressure to hit short-term revenue targets, a lot of companies are falling back on reactive behaviors. A lot of companies are looking to sell to anyone in any account so that they can hit their short-term revenue targets. As a marketing leader, I have personally been asked to significantly increase spend to have a short-term impact on lead volume. I see some nods and some smiles in here, so y'all know what I'm talking about. So while these tactics might be effective in the short term, it's really a temporary boost, and it's undermining your long-term sustainable growth and how you're going to get to that profitable growth versus the growth at all costs. So with that, let's throw that playbook out the window. Like, we're not even going to think about it anymore, at least for these next few slides. And we're going to reframe our thinking around the flywheel concept introduced by Jim Collins in Good to Great, right? It's all about that consistent, sustainable growth that compounds over time. So how do we identify our flywheel and use that at the center of our go-to-market strategy across all of the commercial team, not what marketing's just doing and not what sales is doing? We start by looking at who our most profitable customers are. And how do we start to identify who our most profitable customers are? We look at our data. The data Jessica must have is immense because it's not just at the top of the funnel. She's probably tracking everybody through their close of sale and what they do next, right? So what are the questions that you can ask yourself to understand who your most profitable customers are? Who are the accounts that have the highest initial contract value? Who are the accounts that have the highest consumable pull-through rates? Who are the accounts that are most likely to publish their findings, getting us to our customer advocates also? And is there an application theme amongst these accounts? Are they all particularly working in a specific research area, right? And I'm not talking about neurology as a broad-based research focus, right? I'm talking about neurotoxicity. And once we understand that application, we can then take a look at what are the themes in terms of the size of those accounts. Is it really large pharma? Is it medium pharma? Small pharma? Perhaps it's really medium pharma that is coming on board as a new customer with the highest initial contract value, and they also have the highest consumable pull-through rates. So then, if that's where we land, what are those look-alike accounts? How do we go identify what those other medium-sized pharma organizations are, but also understand what is our ideal customer profile's next steps? Is there a particular new lab within that entity that is most likely to buy next? And that'll then get us to sort of pinpoint on expansion for us. So then, as now we have our application, we have our account types, we go find our lookalike accounts and our target personas. We can find where those people are going to for information so that we can be there and we can show up. And now, the information, all of this feeds into building the tactical plan. You might notice I haven't mentioned anything about a tactic or anything like that, because your tactics are truly determined by what your customer profile looks like, their account size, where they're going to for information. Now, some of you might call this account-based marketing or account-based selling. I'm really not a fan of those terms, in all honesty, because they create silos, right? And I'm also not really a fan of the analogy that's also referenced of, marketing is like fishing with a net and sales is like fishing with a spear. Create silos and varying approaches to go-to-market strategy. With this type of approach, if we want to give it a name, I would call it account-based experience. But everybody in commercial has a role and responsibility from the very beginning of the campaign all the way through to what that then feeds back into our data for decision-making criteria. So here I'm going to go a little bit deeper, and I'm going to use events because we have a lot of scientific events in our industry, not new news or anything like that, not fake news. They're really expensive. So expensive, and so many times I've been asked, how are we looking at the return on investment of not just the cost of a booth, sending so many people, and so forth. So, seeing that it's trade show season, I asked a quick little poll on LinkedIn recently of what was the priority for folks attending trade shows. And the number one priority was new leads. And in all honesty, I wasn't surprised, right? That's what I expected to answer. But again, I'm going to ask us to shift our thinking on trade shows and think about how we can show up and position our organization as the authoritative resource and scientific expert within the application area that is central to our go-to-market strategy. Because if we're only focusing on new leads, we're also potentially missing the opportunity for helping our existing customers, who we know cost less to expand with, helping them realize the maximum potential from the products and technologies that we have. Okay, so we're going to reframe our thinking around why we're actually showing up to a trade show. So with a trade show itself, it's not just the event that we're doing. We are utilizing all 5 elements of these growth pillars as part of our collective effort in showing up to the event. But we're only showing up to the event if we have credible scientific data to help answer the challenges and problems that our customers have, reasons why they're going to the show itself, right? And I'm not saying that anybody in this room it takes this approach, but I've seen it more often than not where a lot of companies will book a booth, do a few posts on LinkedIn, and then expect to get new leads. It's just not the way that it works, right? So with the event and leveraging all 5 growth pillars, you're going to those events that are key to your application. You have your pre-show activities that you're running. But I'm also going to ask the question of, booking meetings ahead of the event. And how is the sales team or anybody responsible for that outreach to book the meetings? How many predetermined meetings have they booked? And if we don't have any predetermined meetings booked, are we going to the right event? Is this really our audience? Or if the rep doesn't meet the threshold for the predetermined meetings, should they be going to the event? Again, it's being efficient about the resources that we have and how do we make sure that we're getting and maximizing that potential return on investment. Okay, as I mentioned, one of my favorites to talk about is messaging and storytelling. And when we think about messaging and storytelling, there's differentiation messaging where you're talking about your product, why you're the better alternative. And there's value-based messaging, really talking about your customers' problems and challenges and how you solve them, similar to the challenger model that was mentioned earlier in the panel. This is what we're going to go deep into today and also talk about that company narrative and how you can leverage your narrative and messaging to stand out amongst the noise within the space. Within life sciences, we all talk about how we're unlocking the promise of genomics. But I actually don't know what that means if I go to your website, right? So let's build a narrative. To introduce you to this concept, there's a book called Play Bigger that speaks about category design. And category design is all about creating and dominating a new market instead of simply competing in an existing market. And it's about category designers aiming to shape the category itself and how people view the problem that you're solving in the world. And that is the part that we're going to go deeper into. It's chapter 5 of the book, and it's really all about crafting that narrative. But to define what a company narrative and point of view is, first we're going to talk about what it is not. Company narrative and point of view is not your company values. Your company values are super important because it drives culture, as we were talking about earlier before as well, but that's not your narrative and point of view. A narrative and point of view is also not about your founder. Yes, there's charisma that they might bring to the market, but a company narrative and point of view is bigger than any single individual. So a company narrative and a point of view is your company's perspective on the world. It's really about positioning you as the trailblazer and the authority defining your industry's future. So again, as I was talking before and showing up at a trade show, right, having that scientific data available to position yourself as the experts in the field and how you're tackling the problems also comes back down to your company narrative and point of view. What are you going to go deep on? And how are you going to define this for everybody? So a strong company narrative and point of view, it really accomplishes and it positions you as the authority and trailblazer. It shapes how the world sees the problem. And it's not just about positioning your product or anything like that, and positioning your product as the solution to this problem. It's really about inspiring people to take action because they like your product, but they actually believe in the philosophy behind it.
Oh, yeah.
What you have on the screen is the definition on the left-hand side of the chasm model positioning template. When I first joined Illumina in 2008, one of the first things that happened during my first week was I was given the Crossing the Chasm book, put right on my desk, never read it before. And for those that may not be as intimately familiar with Crossing the Chasm and the positioning template, it's really about that differentiation, and it's positioning why you're better than the alternative. It is leveraging your product and your features and your technology. However, some of the limitations with it is that features of a product can be emulated by competitors. Features of a product always continue to evolve. Now, the chasm method is absolutely what you're going to see most companies using in the innovator and early adopter stages of crossing the chasm model, the bell curve that Hamida was talking about earlier. But there's a lot of companies that fall down that chasm and actually don't make it over to the early majority. To penetrate and really begin to gain revenue and market share within the early majority market, the value-based messaging aspect is showing them how you solve their problems. It's not talking about why you're better, faster, cheaper. It's actually sharing with them how your product solves their problems. And in solution selling or the challenger model, it's really about why they're hired and fired. Right? You're going to help them thrive in their own career if they choose your product. So, again, it's not that one is better than the other. It's really about how can we potentially use both of these to grow market share and grow revenue. And so I'm going to walk you through a case study from my time at Emulate. Emulate was founded and spun out of the Wyss Institute at Harvard. They're an organ-on-a-chip technology company. And when I arrived at the company, there were a number of challenges that we were facing. First of all, the main narrative was around what the technology is and the features of the product. Our early users were the innovators really that were interested in tinkering around with the technology. But we had fundamental challenges if we were going to cross the chasm to that early majority market. One, our customers were not using our technology to make critical no-go decisions about progressing a compound into the clinic. So if they're not making those critical decisions with our technology, why? And it came down to the fact that it had not been shown at a scalable sort of a set of data to be reproducible enough. People were not trusting its reproducibility aspects. There was also concern that it was too expensive, and would the FDA allow organ chip data as part of an IND submission? Those are massive challenges, right? If they're not going to allow organ chip data as part of an IND submission, we're going to be a tinker around technology forever. So we made a strategic decision to undertake the largest organ-on-a-chip study ever done to date. This study allowed us to really go deep into highlighting the scientific specifics around comparing organ chips to spheroids in animal models. The compounds that we tested, we knew had either made it to the market and people had actually died because the spheroids in animal models missed the level of toxicity that they had, or they were late stage failures, there were black box warnings, and so forth, right? So undertaking this massive study that we understood what the other methods, sensitivity and specificity rates were. Now, the other thing about this study that we understood is that we needed a third-party analyst. The third-party analyst that we brought in was Jack Scannell, and Jack Scannell is well known for coining the term Eroom's law, which is the opposite of Moore's law, which focuses on the fact that no matter the amount of technology innovation that has happened over the past decade or so, drug development is getting longer and costs more. So Jack came in to provide an economic lens and calculated analysis for us that was able to articulate that if we improved patient safety and implemented the Emulate liver chip into drug discovery and development workflows, pharmaceutical organizations could see a $3 billion increase in R&D productivity. Now that allowed us to go to executives. These sound bites leverage the differentiation messaging at the top, but also that value-based messaging. That value-based messaging also allowed us to communicate to non-scientific audiences, because at the same time, remember that IND submission issue that I mentioned? At the same time, the FDA Modernization Act 2.0 was up for vote within federal government. That would allow organ chip data to be submitted within an IND filing. So all of these things sort of centered around a pivotal moment for us, and these are some of the results that we saw. So first thing to understand is we did not hide this study. We posted it immediately to bioRxiv. It was a little uncomfortable, I'm not gonna lie, because typically we would not do this previously. We would hold it close to the chest and we would wait for that final publication to come out. But some of this changed around the COVID timeframe. So as soon as we posted it to bioRxiv, we held a webinar to go through the paper and really break down the fundamentals of the paper. It was the largest attended webinar that Emulate ever had in the history of hosting events in the company. Now, because we were under review still, we had to be very careful about what we were doing, what we were not doing, but we took the data on tour. You can take your data on tour to a scientific conference and talk about it in a scientific capacity while your paper is under review, okay? This paper then, in the December 2022 timeframe, was officially published in Nature. A few weeks later, President Biden signed the FDA Modernization Act 2.0 into law, and immediately we started fielding inbound requests from the New York Times, from the Wall Street Journal, people that would never talk to us previously, never ever, right? And so it's really a flywheel of content and engagement that helps position us as the authoritative resource in this space. While that bill was going through Congress, we were invited to submit testimony. There was another bill that came up in Maryland. We were invited to speak before the Maryland Congress and Senate, all advocating for funding around this technology as well. But you can see it continued, right? It continued forward, and just last month, Emulate was actually accepted into the iSTAND program as the first and only organ chip technology provider to achieve this accomplishment. And what I haven't talked about is revenue, and that is because Emulate is a privately held organization. But what I want you to understand is that we don't have to wait for a product coming out of R&D. We, as commercial professionals, as commercial leaders, can advocate for the data that we need in order to go build that trust with our customer base. This absolutely turned us from a life science tools vendor to a trusted partner. And that trusted partner status is the exact location you want to be. Okay, operational efficiency. We've talked a little bit about this already. There's always tension between marketing and sales. A lot of executives will tell you that some of that tension is healthy. You know, it's the same type of tension that exists between product management and R&D, right? But how do we make sure that it doesn't turn toxic? I've seen it toxic. I've lived and breathed it. It's hard. It's really hard in that environment. But if we are one commercial team all working against a unified go-to-market strategy, why are we at odds with each other? So here's the thing. There's this that also plays into it, right? So every planning season, questions always come up of how much pipeline and revenue should marketing be responsible for? And should marketing be responsible for a percentage of expansion? No, I'd say stop the madness, because commercial is 100% responsible for revenue. And the methods that I have X's next to here, from marketing sourced pipeline to sales sourced pipeline, I mean, in all honesty, I've used these in my life, right? I think it's a traditional approach of how we look at things. But if we can evolve and really look at that multi-touch attribution that Jessica was talking about earlier too, we can track every touch point along a customer's buying journey. And we can track it all by campaigns and how the various growth pillars interplay throughout these campaigns and targeted activities that we are doing, right? So it really becomes about the collective commercial effort about getting to that revenue number. And, you know, again, might be controversial, but customer success, or whether it's a field application scientist, however you name it in your organization, they should be responsible for this number as well. They're in there talking to customers all the time. And so, again, it's really about what are the roles and responsibilities for everybody moving the customer through their journey. How do we present on this? Right? And how do we make this reality and into a story of data? Because in my life, the typical monthly commercial review or board deck has typically gone like this. Sales presents, marketing presents, and then there's an aspect of customer success. It's still siloed, right? So by operating under this unified effort, you can have a scorecard at the very beginning of your deck that breaks down what your KPIs are underneath every single one of your growth pillars. You could switch this up and do it by campaigns, but the intent here is to really show how the collective commercial efforts are getting us to where we want the organization to be. It also allows us to say, okay, perhaps our inbound pipeline coverage is red, right? So you could do a red, yellow, green for the parts, for the squares that are green right now, to show what's on target and what's not on target. So maybe inbound pipeline coverage across the reps is down. Let's dive into that and understand why. Why, if we've uploaded accounts and leads into the system and we're working them, and those are doing well, right, across our campaigns, why aren't the inbound ones doing well? Because those ones usually actually are of higher value. So something to think about on how you operationalize and begin really communicating your cohesive commercial story together. So 3 takeaways. It's really about unified go-to-market strategy. We are one team. Yes, there are functions, there's marketing, sales, and customer success, but we are one team. We all need roles and responsibilities. Differentiation and value-based messaging serve different purposes. They're both useful, but the value-based messaging is what's missing a lot of times. And then the operational efficiency. Again, one team. Let's operate and act like one team. We're all trying to get to the same end result. It's not about doing it different ways. So Final slide is if you'd like to continue this conversation, I recently launched Crevi Community. It's an online platform to connect and network with other life sciences, marketing, sales, and customer success professionals, very much like what we are doing in this room today. But the SaaS and high-tech industry has an abundance of these resources. We have not had something like this before. And so I give major kudos to SAMPS for beginning the bringing together of everybody in this industry, and hope you can find this helpful as well. Thank you.